My wife arrived with me at the party. We were holding hands, smiles everywhere, greetings exchanged between acquaintances and strangers. I felt good. I was happy. Proud, even. Married for years, we built a life together, a family. And yet, that very night, before everyone's eyes, she was ripped away from me. Not with violence, not with shouting or arguments. But with an act so cold, so devastating, that it left me breathless. He just took it. My God, he just reached out his hand, took hers and led her away. And she went. Without hesitating, without looking back. As if I were nothing. As if everything we had built had never existed. The entire hall stopped. People whispered. Looks crossed, perplexed, shocked, some even curious. I could hear the murmurs, what's going on? Is she really leaving with him? But I didn't hear anything else. My chest burned, my hands shook. I didn't think. I just followed. I walked among people, bumping into chairs, tripping over my own steps. I felt like this couldn't be happening. It was a nightmare, it had to be. But the pain was real. The betrayal was real. And I needed to see it. I needed to understand. I passed through the double doors of the lounge and saw them ahead, getting into a car. His car. My body acted before my mind. I got into my own car and followed them. The steering wheel gripped between my fingers, the headlights illuminating the path to the destination that, at that moment, I didn't know, but that, somehow, seemed to call me. I needed to hear it from her mouth. I needed her to look me in the eyes and tell me what was happening. When I finally found them, my heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. My footsteps echoed on the sidewalk as I approached. They were there, laughing. Laughing. As if nothing had happened. As if I didn't exist. As if that night wasn't a turning point in my life. My voice came out before I could think, serious, choked with anger and disappointment. Why are you doing this to our family? She froze. The smile died on his face. His eyes widened, and for a moment, for a brief second, I saw something there, guilt. Fear. Or maybe just surprised that I found them both. But I already knew the answer. At that moment, everything made sense. All the little signs I ignored. The nights she arrived later, the deleted messages on her cell phone, the different perfume, the way she avoided my touch. I had already made my decision. Divorce was inevitable. But that wasn't the end. What I didn't know that night was that her betrayal wasn't just a mistake. It was not a passing case. It was a sentence. And not just for our marriage, but for herself. Because what she didn't know, what he didn't know, was that this party wasn't just any party. It was a celebration. A celebration for her. And now, everyone there knew. Every person in that room now knew the truth. Every friend, every relative, every acquaintance. And just as she left me that night, as she turned her back on me without hesitation, now she was the one feeling the weight of the judgment, the condemning looks, the suffocating questions. And me? I just watched. Because some betrayals don't need to be avenged with words. Some betrayals take revenge on their own. And that was just the first twist. Welcome to the channel. Here, we do not support betrayal. The stories you will hear are fictional, but their lessons are real. Infidelity destroys homes, erodes trust and leaves marks that not even time can erase. Our goal is to show how every choice has consequences, and betrayal always exacts a high price. Now, prepare. What you are about to hear is shocking, intense, and full of twists and turns. A story that shows the true weight of betrayal. Happy listening. Soft music played in the hall, mixing with the buzz of excited voices and the clink of toasting glasses. The night seemed perfect. An elegant event, surrounded by friends, co-workers and family, all gathered in celebration. Among the guests, Daniel and Clara stood out. Not just because they were a beautiful couple, but because of the way they presented themselves to the world, united, aligned, the kind of couple that seemed tailor-made for each other. He is a man with a strong presence, confident posture, a successful and respected professional. She was always well-groomed, with an attentive look, a calculated smile, a woman who exuded elegance and charm in every gesture. They walked among the guests hand in hand, greeting acquaintances, exchanging complicit glances. In anyone's eyes, they were the portrait of a solid marriage, one that exudes trust and arouses admiration. Daniel was excited about the night. The celebration had a special meaning for him. He had worked hard over the last few months, balancing professional responsibilities and personal life, and now he was here, ready to enjoy every moment with the woman he loved. He watched Clara smile at people, talk naturally, and he felt proud. She always knew how to behave at these events, how to captivate, how to make everyone feel good around her. He held her waist for a moment, smelling her familiar scent, and whispered that she looked beautiful. She smiled, thanked him, but soon turned her attention to another conversation, leaving in the air the feeling that, lately, she was always a little distant, always with her mind somewhere else. The night continued, and as the hours passed, Daniel noticed small details that, perhaps, he hadn't noticed before. Clara seemed scattered, her eyes wandered around the room as if looking for something, or someone. She checked her cell phone more often than usual, and when he asked if everything was okay, she smiled and said yes, it was just something about work. Daniel believed, because he always trusted her. Since they met, the basis of their relationship has always been trust, the certainty that, regardless of anything, they were partners, they were together. They had been married almost 10 years ago. The beginning was intense, full of passion and shared dreams. Clara was different from any woman Daniel had ever met. Intelligent, determined, and at the same time, with a lightness that made him laugh even on the most difficult days. He fell in love with her spontaneity, with the way she seemed to live each moment with intensity. And she was enchanted by his firmness, by the security he conveyed. Together, they built a stable, comfortable life. They had no children, something that, at first, they seemed to agree on, but which, over the years, became a delicate subject. Clara avoided talking about it, changing the subject whenever Daniel tried to bring it up. He wanted to understand if she had changed her mind, if there was something that worried her, but for some reason he felt that it was becoming increasingly difficult to reach her. Over the past few months, he had noticed that she was different. Small details, subtle things, but when added together, they formed a bigger picture. Clara spent more time away, always with some new commitment. The messages on her cell phone became more constant, and often, when he approached, she quickly blocked the screen. She no longer showed the same enthusiasm as before when he surprised her with flowers or when they planned something together. But Daniel didn't want to believe that meant something bad. Relationships change, time brings new phases, and maybe that was just it. A moment of adaptation, a phase that would soon pass. That night, he wanted to forget these worries. I just wanted to enjoy the event, toast to the future and rekindle the connection between them. He held her hand tighter, looked at her with a smile and suggested they dance. She hesitated for a moment, as if her mind was somewhere else, but then accepted, allowing herself to be guided to the middle of the room. The bodies moved in sync, and for a few seconds, Daniel felt that everything was as before. Her scent, the warmth of her skin, the way they fit perfectly. He whispered that he loved her. She looked into his eyes, smiled, but her answer came late, as if it had been plucked from a distant thought. The music continued, the room vibrated with conversation, laughter and celebration. But Daniel felt a weight in his chest, a restlessness he couldn't name. Something was wrong. He didn't know what, he didn't know how, but he felt it. And the night was still far from over. In the corner of the hall, a figure watched. The fixed gaze, an almost imperceptible presence in the crowd. Someone who, for Daniel, was still irrelevant, but who, in a few moments, would change everything. Daniel continued to hold Clara's hand as the dance slowly unfolded, but inside, something in him was twisting. Her smile was there, her elegant posture and engaging conversation were there, but there was a disconnect that he couldn't ignore. It was as if, despite being by his side, his mind was somewhere else. That restlessness he had been feeling in recent months seemed to take shape, like a figure that previously hid in the shadows and now gained more defined contours. He tried to push the thought away, to convince himself that it was just paranoia, that everything was fine, but the way Clara looked at her cell phone so often, how her eyes swept the room without ever resting on him for long, how her smile seemed automatic and lifeless when directed at him, everything indicated that something was wrong. The night continued and, little by little, Daniel began to observe more than just participate. The hall was full of voices, laughter and music, but inside everything seemed muffled. It was as if he were underwater, watching everything happen around him without actually being part of it. He watched Clara as she moved among the guests, always courteous, always impeccable. But now he noticed something he hadn't noticed before, a pattern. Every time she moved away from his side, her gaze seemed to search for a fixed point in the crowd. It didn't take long for him to notice where her eyes were going. Who her eyes went to. In the corner of the room, a man. Tall, well-dressed, a contained smile on his face. He did nothing but stand there, holding a glass of wine, watching. And Clara looked at him. It wasn't a casual look, it wasn't a quick and forgettable exchange of glances. It was something more. Something intense. A silent kind of connection that needed no words. Daniel felt his chest tighten, as if something was being ripped out of him. The scene was there, before his eyes, and even without having any concrete proof, something inside him already knew. He began to observe the two from afar, trying to understand what was happening, looking for signs that could indicate that his mind was just playing tricks, that it was nothing. But every detail only reinforced the opposite. Clara smiled differently when she looked at that man. She touched her hair, adjusted her dress, touched her lips with her fingers. Small gestures, unconscious, but that spoke more than any explanation she could give. And then, it happened. She walked away. Without warning, without saying goodbye, he just walked away and walked towards the back of the room, leaving through the double doors that led to the garden. Daniel felt a lump in his throat when he saw that, seconds later, the man did the same. They didn't leave together, but it was obvious they were going to the same place. Confirmation came the moment he went to the balcony and saw the two outside. The man had his back to him, but Clara was facing him, and Daniel could clearly see the way she was looking at him. It wasn't a casual look. It was a look of desire. The world around Daniel fell silent. He couldn't hear anything other than his own heart beating loudly against his chest. Every muscle in his body tensed, every part of him screamed for him to get there, for him to demand explanations, for him to put an end to this nonsense right then and there. But he didn't move. He stood still, watching, while Clara smiled at that man like she hadn't smiled at him in a long time. Then she saw the man touch her face, an intimate, familiar touch. Clara hesitated for a moment, looked around as if checking if anyone was watching, and then allowed herself to do so. He gave himself up. The kiss was brief but devastating. Daniel felt as if he had been punched in the stomach, a sharp blow that knocked the air out of him. There were no more doubts, no more assumptions, no more room for deception. There, in front of him, Clara was betraying him. Not in an abstract or metaphorical way, but real, concrete. The woman he loved, the woman he built a life with, was there, in the arms of another man, far from everything they once promised each other. He didn't feel angry right away. What came first was shock, disbelief. The brain refused to process it, to accept what the eyes were seeing. But as the seconds passed, the pain began to transform. Something inside him was irreversibly broken, something that could never be fixed again. The disappointment became an unbearable weight, a crushing anguish that only grew with each new breath. Then Daniel moved. He left the balcony, went down the steps of the hall and walked outside. His steps were firm, but inside him everything was in ruins. With every step, he felt like he was leaving something behind. A piece of your history, a part of your heart. He didn't know what he was going to say when he got there. I didn't know if I could say anything without exploding. But I needed to look into her eyes. I needed to see Clara's reaction when confronted. When he finally reached the two, they didn't see him right away. The man was still holding Clara's hand, and she was smiling at him in a way that Daniel would never forget. When she finally noticed his presence, the smile disappeared. Shock washed over her face, and for a moment, it looked like she didn't even know what to do. The silence prolonged, heavy, suffocating. Then, Daniel finally spoke. The voice was low, but carried with everything that was burning inside him. "Why are you doing this to our family?" Clara's eyes widened, as if those words hit her in a way she hadn't expected. But Daniel didn't want any more explanations, excuses or empty justifications. It didn't matter anymore. The decision had already been made. He was going away. But that night was still far from over. The silence between the three was suffocating. Daniel remained there, standing, facing Clara, while the other man, whose presence now seemed even more insignificant, looked away, perhaps hoping that it would pass without a major confrontation. But nothing would happen. Nothing could be ignored. The world Daniel knew had already been destroyed, and all that was left now was the bitter taste of betrayal, disappointment, and the truth he still didn't fully know. The question still hung in the air. Why was she doing this to their family? With everything they built? He didn't expect a real answer, but something inside him needed to hear her voice, needed her to at least try to justify the unjustifiable. Clara swallowed hard, trying to find words, but they seemed to escape her mouth. Her look was a mixture of shock and despair, as if she had never imagined that she would be caught at that moment, as if she thought she could continue hiding that secret for as long as she wanted. She let go of the other man's hand, a gesture that, to Daniel, meant nothing. It was too late to pretend modesty, to act as if nothing had happened. He had already seen everything. He already knew. But there was something more. Something he still didn't fully understand. Clara's eyes wavered for a moment, looking away from him, as if searching for a way out, an excuse, anything that could alleviate the situation. But there was no way out. There was no excuse. There was nothing that could reverse that. Then, finally, she opened her mouth, but her voice came out shaky, hesitant, as if she were holding back something much bigger than just a confession of betrayal. He interrupted her before she could try to come up with something. His patience had run out, his pain was already unbearable. He needed to know. He demanded to know. With every word that came out of Clara's mouth, Daniel felt his breathing become heavy. But then, in an instant, something broke inside him irreversibly. It wasn't just the betrayal. It wasn't just the kiss. It wasn't just the presence of that man. It was what that night meant, what that event represented, what he himself, without knowing it, had planned and dreamed of for so long. He remembered. The celebration. The party had been organized for Clara. To celebrate something that was exclusively hers. Something he believed was recognition for everything they had built together. But now it all made sense. Now he saw the whole picture, and what he saw made his stomach turn almost violently. Clara hadn't just betrayed him. She had exposed her betrayal in the most symbolic moment possible. The party was for her. But it wasn't just any celebration. It was an advertisement. She and her lover were together. Publicly. There, in front of all the friends, the family, all the people who knew Daniel and Clara as a couple, the truth was being revealed. She didn't intend to tell him before the party because, deep down, she didn't need to. Everyone already knew. Everyone except him. Daniel felt his body freeze. The betrayal, in itself, was devastating. But the way it happened, the time, the place, the circumstances, it all made the pain rise to a level he could never imagine feeling. He tried to speak, but the words just wouldn't come out. Clara tried to hold his hand, perhaps to alleviate the situation, to try to say that it wasn't quite like that there was an explanation, but he pulled away as if her touch burned him. He didn't want to listen anymore. I didn't want to look at her anymore. His gaze turned to the guests inside the hall, to the looks that now looked at them with curiosity, some with pity, others just waiting for what seemed to be a spectacle of horror and public humiliation to unfold. And then, he laughed. He laughed because there was nothing else he could do. There was no screaming, there was no argument, there was nothing that could express what I was feeling at that moment. Everything was already done. Everything was already lost. He looked once again at Clara and the man beside her. Then, without saying another word, he just turned his back and walked away. But that story was still far from over. Daniel walked aimlessly. His steps were heavy, but his mind was dazed, as if his own body was moving without him really realizing it. The night around seemed distorted, the party lights shone in the background, mixing with the muffled noise of the music that continued to play, indifferent to what had just happened. His breathing was uneven, his chest was tight, his heart was beating hard against his ribs as if trying to escape the pain that was now consuming him. He tried to push away the weight that was building up in his head, but the images kept coming back with suffocating clarity. Clara, in the other man's arms. Clara, looking at him with guilt but no regret. Clara, his wife, his partner of years, making his betrayal public on the same night that should have been a celebration. He needed to get out of there. He needed to get away. His footsteps took him to the parking lot, but before he could get into the car, he heard your voice behind him. She followed him. Daniel, wait. He stopped. His entire body tensed. Not because I wanted to hear it, but because I couldn't just move on without answers. Not after what she did. She slowly turned around, and there she was, with teary eyes, her face marked by an expression of someone who knew there was no way to fix what she had done, but who was still trying. What do you want me to say? His voice was deeper than I imagined, carried by a mix of anger and pain. Do you want me to pretend nothing happened? That I accept that this was all a big mistake and that, somehow, I need to understand? She took a deep breath, hugging her arms as if to protect herself from something she caused. I never wanted it to be like this. And how exactly did you want it to be, Clara? He took a step forward, pain brimming in his eyes. How did you think this would end? Did you plan this whole scene? Make me look like an idiot in front of everyone? No. She shook her head, her voice breaking. I swear, it wasn't supposed to be like this. I didn't want you to find out like this. He laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Ah, so you wanted me to find out later? When everyone already knew? When the world had already accepted that you replaced me and I was the last to understand? She closed her eyes for a moment, swallowing hard. I was going to tell you, Daniel. When? He didn't let her finish. When there was nothing left for me to do about it. When the only thing left for me was to sign the divorce papers. She hesitated, and that was enough for him to understand the answer. There was nothing more to say. There was nothing that could erase what was done. But still, there was something he couldn't ignore. He was always there, wasn't he? His voice now no longer carried the initial anger, but a more bitter, more defeated tone. While I was trying to save our marriage, while I believed we could get back what we had, you were already with him. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but Daniel no longer felt compassion. I didn't want to hurt you. But it hurt. He cut her off. You destroyed everything, Clara. All. She sobbed, covering her face with her hands, but he didn't move to comfort her. Not this time. I never planned this. But, it happened. He clenched his fists, feeling his anger rising once more. It happened. He repeated, incredulously. Clara, betrayal is not a traffic accident. It's not a stumble. You made choices. You deceived me. You lied to me every day. She didn't respond. I couldn't. For a long moment, the two just stood there, motionless. The wind blew between them, bringing with it a cold that came not from the weather, but from the irreversible distance that now separated them. So, Daniel took a deep breath and did what he knew he needed to do. I'm leaving. Her eyes widened. What? You've already made your choice. Now, I'm doing mine. She took a step forward, as if she could stop him. Daniel, please, He raised his hand, stopping her. No, his tone was firm, definitive. There is nothing more to say. And, without looking back, he got into the car and drove away. But as he drove, a single question rang in his mind. If everyone knew. If that party was an advertisement. Why was he the only one left in the dark? The answer to that question, he would soon discover. And it would be much worse than he could have imagined. Daniel drove without a specific destination. The road lights blurred by as his mind spun, caught in a whirlwind of thoughts that refused to organize themselves. The silence inside the car was oppressive, almost deafening, but it was better than any noise coming from outside. He didn't want to hear anything. I didn't want to think about anything. But it was impossible. Everything came back, as if his own memory was against him, repeating the images of betrayal, Clara's expression when she was caught, the look of guilt that didn't hide regret, just the discomfort of having been caught. Her words echoed in his head, like knives being stabbed repeatedly into his skin. I never planned this. As if betrayal happened without intention, as if it were a casual mistake and not a sequence of conscious decisions. As if she hadn't, at some point, chosen to be with another man while he believed they were still a couple. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his fingers hurting from the pressure. His entire body was tense, as if holding back a storm about to explode within him. The worst of all was not the act itself, but the humiliation. Everyone knew. Everyone except him. How could he have been so blind? How could you not notice? How many times have you been surrounded by people who were already aware of the betrayal, who looked at him with pity or mockery while he smiled, thinking that his life was under control? He felt a bitter taste in his mouth. It was disgust. Anger. But most of all, it was a pain that seemed to cut from the inside out, as if his very soul was slowly tearing itself apart. Without realizing it, he had moved miles away from the party location. The streets were empty, lit only by streetlights scattered along the sidewalk. He parked the car, let go of the steering wheel and took a deep breath. His eyes burned. I didn't know if it was from tiredness or pain. He ran his hands over his face, trying to organize his thoughts, but everything was too jumbled. His mind insisted on repeating the scene, but more than that, it showed him different versions of the past. Little moments he ignored. The cell phone that Clara always carried with her, never leaving it on the table. Excuses for work meetings that didn't exist before. The distance that grew between them without him even realizing it. She had already left her marriage long before that night. I just didn't have the courage to say it. He took out his cell phone and opened the contact list. His fingers hovered over her name, but hesitated. What could he say that hadn't already been said? What words would be able to express what you felt at that moment? There were no more conversations to be had. There were no more explanations. And deep down, he knew that no answer would change what was already done. Time passed strangely. He didn't know if it had been minutes or hours. But at some point, he realized he couldn't stay there forever. I needed to go home. I needed to at least try to understand what would happen the next day. How do you wake up the next morning after seeing your life fall apart in a matter of seconds? How do you continue living when everything you knew as reality turns into a lie? Getting home was an even more brutal blow than he expected. The silence was even worse than what I had felt in the car. It was a heavy silence, filled with absence. His home, once a shared space, now seemed like a foreign place, full of memories he no longer knew if he wanted to keep. That sofa, where they had watched movies together so many times. The kitchen, where he surprised her with dinners. The bedroom, where he believed they shared true intimacy. Now everything seemed contaminated, tainted by the truth he had discovered. He walked slowly down the hallway, eyes roaming the space as if he were seeing everything for the first time. The feeling was of a stranger in one's own home. He ran his fingers over the furniture, as if trying to find something tangible, something real, something that still belonged to him. But every corner seemed to echo with her presence, as if Clara were still there, as if her shadow were imprinted on the walls. He sat on the edge of the bed and faced the floor. The weight on his chest seemed to double, as if he were carrying something impossible to bear. He thought about how absurd it was that everything could change so quickly. In one night, he had lost everything. Not just a wedding. He lost the trust he had in her. He lost the version of his life that he believed to be true. But most of all, he lost himself. He didn't know what to do next. He didn't know what his next step would be. But he knew one thing. That story wasn't over yet. Daniel spent the night awake. The clock beside the bed ticked the hours at a pace that seemed slow and merciless. Every minute that passed was a reminder that time kept moving, even if he couldn't keep up. The bed seemed bigger, colder, as if it no longer belonged to him. Every detail in the house now had a new meaning, a new layer of memories he didn't want to revisit. His cell phone vibrated from time to time, but he refused to look at it. He knew that, at some point, Clara would try to talk to him, but what could she say? What was left to be said? He got up when the sun began to weakly illuminate the window, his body feeling heavy, as if every movement was an enormous effort. He went to the kitchen, but the idea of eating seemed absurd. He picked up a cup and poured coffee without really paying attention, staring at the dark liquid while his mind still wandered to the chaos of the night before. He felt adrift, as if his very identity had been ripped from his hands. Who was he now? The cheated husband? The man everyone looked at with pity? The last to know the truth? The sound of the doorbell cut through his thoughts like a sharp blade. He froze for a moment, already knowing who it was before he even looked through the door. He walked to the entrance and hesitated, taking a deep breath before turning the handle. And there she was. Clara looked different from the last time he saw her. Her face was haggard, her swollen eyes showed that she had been crying, but he couldn't tell if it was regret or just despair at having been discovered. She was there, facing him, waiting for some reaction. But he didn't invite her in. "We can talk." Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Daniel held the door, making it clear that he didn't intend to make room. To talk. Now. After everything. She lowered her eyes, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I know nothing I say will change what happened. But I need you to listen to me." He laughed, but there was no humor in his expression. "Do you need me to listen to you? After spending months hiding the truth from me?" Clara closed her eyes for a moment, trying to find some way to move on from this. "I never wanted it to be like this. I tried. I tried to end it before you found out." He pressed his lips together, feeling the anger returning. "But it's not over, is it?" You continued. "You decided to expose everything in front of everyone as if I were the only idiot who didn't know." She lifted her head, her eyes teary, but he could no longer empathize. "I got lost, Daniel." He crossed his arms, holding her gaze. "Is that the best excuse you have?" She shook her head, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of her own guilt was finally pressing down on her body. "I don't know who I am anymore." Daniel took a deep breath. Part of him wanted to end that conversation right then and there, but another part wanted answers. "Then tell me. When did I become insufficient for you? Her eyes widened, as if the question had struck a nerve. You were never insufficient. I went. He narrowed his eyes. What does that mean? She hesitated. For a moment he looked like he was going to say something, but then he looked away. I just felt suffocated. He laughed again in disbelief. Suffocated? I gave you freedom. I have always trusted you. How exactly was that suffocating? Clara bit her lip, as if she didn't know how to explain. I changed. I have become someone I don't recognize. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Then why are you here? She took a deep breath, hesitating before responding. Because I don't want this to be the last time we talk. He was silent for a moment. He felt the irony of that phrase curl inside him like a cold blade. It's already too late for that. She blinked quickly, trying to hold back the tears. Do you hate me? He looked at her for a long time before responding. No. But I will never love you again. The silence prolonged between them. And then, without saying anything else, he closed the door. And this time, he knew he wouldn't go back. Time passed strangely after that night. For Daniel, the days were no longer divided into mornings and evenings, but between moments when his mind was silent and moments when thoughts consumed him completely. The pain didn't just come from the betrayal itself, but from the way it all happened, the way it was exposed, the fact that everyone around him seemed to know before he did. The world moved on, but he still felt like he was standing in the same place, stuck in the memory of the moment everything fell apart. But the truth is that life didn't wait for anyone. And somehow, even without wanting to, he had to continue. The divorce process was quick. Clara, perhaps out of guilt or just because she understood that she no longer had any right to object, didn't make anything difficult. They divided the assets, signed the papers, and within a few months, what was once a marriage was now just a terminated contract. But there was something about Clara that Daniel noticed every time he met her to resolve bureaucratic issues. At first, she seemed relieved, as if she was convincing herself that this was the best thing to do. But as the days passed, the sparkle in her eyes began to fade. It was as if the freedom he sought so much had not brought him the satisfaction he expected. As if, for the first time, he was facing the true consequences of his actions. He saw her a few times after the breakup, and each time he met her, he noticed that she was different. The face that was always impeccable now seemed tired, the smiles were forced, the gaze was lost. She tried to live her life with the man she destroyed her marriage for, but soon discovered that not every fantasy survives reality. He wasn't the person she imagined he would be. It wasn't someone who made her feel special, but just someone else. Someone who didn't treat her the way Daniel treated her, someone who didn't offer the security and unconditional love that she, deep down, always had. But it was already too late to turn back. It was already too late to rebuild something that she herself destroyed. As for Daniel, he took a while to recover, but he did not allow himself to be consumed by the past. He found a new routine, filled his time with things he never had time to do before. He started traveling more, getting to know places and people, and, at some point, he realized that the pain no longer dominated him like it used to. It was just a scar, a reminder of something that once existed, but that no longer defined who he was. He didn't stop believing in love, but he learned to see the signs he previously ignored. He learned that trust is fragile and that no one is immune to disloyalty. Clara tried to look for him after a while. She sent messages, tried to start a conversation casually, but he didn't respond. Not because he still held a grudge, but because he knew there was nothing more to be said. She had made her choices, and he had made his. The chapter was closed. The last time he heard about her was through mutual friends. They said things weren't going well, that she seemed regretful, lost. But that was no longer his problem. She had had everything and chose to throw it away. Now he had to deal with the consequences. And Daniel? He moved on. He found someone who really valued him, who saw in him everything that Clara could never see. Someone who didn't see him as a safe haven to be abandoned in the first storm, but as a true partner. He finally found the peace he thought he would never have again. Because some betrayals destroy not just relationships, but people. Some betrayals exact a high price. And in the end, Clara paid for every choice she made. And now, I want to know your opinion. What did you think of this story? Do you think Daniel should have given Clara a second chance, or was he right to move on? Comment below, I want to read what you think about this. And if you're not already subscribed, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more stories like this. Remember, here we do not support betrayal, because in the end, the truth always comes out and the price to pay is too high. Until the next story.